The Mar-a-Lago mood music these days, feels pretty rough, huh?
I'm just struck by how unprepared they were by all of this. I mean, the idea that there was this 80% chance pretty much at their convention that I think Kamala Harris or at least Biden was going to step down, and yet they seem completely flat-footed by that, is to me malpractice. But at the same time, I mean, Donald Trump is like walking political malpractice.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. He's the staff writer at The Atlantic. He's the author of 5 books, including This Town and the most recent, Thank You for Your Servitude. It's Leibovich. What's happening, Leibo?
Tim, great to be here. Am I officially a friend of the show now? I mean, I feel like a friend of the show. I've been on a few times, but
you aren't quite at the Tom Nichols status. Eventually,
No.
once you get on a certain number of times, you get a special gift in the mail from me.
Okay.
And but you haven't reached that yet. But certainly in our hearts, you're a friend of the pod.
Okay, yeah, you kept it vague, but I appreciate that. So it'll just give me something free-floatingly to work for.
I'm so happy to see you. I just you have a great piece about 21 minutes in the Buttigieg bubble, which had me chuckling from the DNC. But before we get to Mayor, speaking of a friend of the pod, Mayor Pete, I mean, like this podcast is like the home base of the Pete Stan Club.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't get more on the nose, I don't think, than the Bulwark audience for Pete. But I want your biggest picture impressions. You did both conventions.
Mm-hmm.
You're a man that is observant. I just kind of want to let you flow. I want to put a quarter in and just see what you thought, what your impressions were of the DNC and how it compared to what happened up in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I mean, both conventions were fascinating in their own ways. I mean, the first part about it, just sort of looking at them together, was that they were separated by like 3-4 weeks, but ultimately massive history in the middle of it, which is the Biden, dropping out thing. So I guess
that little thing.
That little thing. I mean, but if you look at both conventions, which occurred on both sides of that, I mean, they were both incredibly hyper confident affairs. I mean, I remember kind of not dreading, but going into the RNC, I was thinking, there could be some menace here, especially because the assassination attempt happened a few days ago. But it turned out to be just the opposite. I mean, there was a mix of overconfidence, but also touched by godness because, Trump had just survived, a assassination attempt. And I guess the only point of argument there was, is he Donald J. Trump or Donald John Trump? Or did he survive the assassination because he has superhuman powers or because he was touched by God? I mean, real controversy.
Is he more of a Moses figure or a Peter or a Jesus on the cross?
All those things. But I mean, look, it was dear leader on steroids, like nothing we've seen before. And then, of course, 2-3 days later, what's interesting about
can we just pause on that for one second, though? Because your menace point has been something I've been wanting to bring up. For anybody that's read Thank You for Servitude or Why We Did It, not a lot of huge compliments from the two of us here for the MAGA culture, all right?
No.
And so when something happens that surprises me in a positive way, I do think it bears mentioning. I went and I re-listened on just like super fast chipmunk speed to the 2 podcasts that we did right after the assassination attempt. Mm-hmm. And I was extremely worried at the time, almost, there was a somberness to them out of expectation, right? Like I thought that there was going to be extremely violent period that followed it, at minimum of rhetoric, and who the hell knows what that would have led to. And that just didn't happen. And I do there needs to be like a very modest cap nod. I guess it's like, do you really got to hand it to them for not, trying to advance a violent backlash? But you kind of do got to hand it to them for not trying to push a violent backlash, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, people were just freaked out. I mean, it was that soon after. So I think, it's a combination of the freaked out factor, maybe some genuine humanity there. And also, again, just a great confidence, which at that moment seemed very well founded. So that convention was framed by the assassination attempt and then Biden getting out a couple of days later, which kind of it changed everything about the race dynamic wise, but it was a big mood swing. I mean, from day to day to day. And then the Democratic convention, you had a somewhat similar, not mood swing, because it was all, I mean, it's been a pretty momentum filled few weeks for Democrats since Biden got off the stage. I thought it was a little messy, or felt like it could be a little messy on Monday night, between the really, the sort of unforced error delays in getting the main speaker, who in that case was Biden, on like well after 11, it turned out. But also, I mean, the Biden thing is and remains kind of messy. And I think that was the night where they kind of had to deal with it and kind of deal with the awkwardness, and kind of had to listen to Biden and then send him off, which itself was weird. And then beginning Tuesday night, the kind of, they could do the work that they were there to do, which is to show the unity, show the star power, get behind Kamala. And also, and obviously there were some great performances. I mean, the Obamas and Tim Walz and a number of other people were really good. So
how do you, I mean, you've done, probably like 37 conventions or something like
94,
that?
Actually.
94.
Yeah, my first was the Kiefoff. No, I don't know.
I mean, what, rather than maybe comparing it to the weird, Trumpian, dear leader kind of vibe. Like, how did it compare to 08, 12, Democratic type conventions for you?
Yeah. I mean, you sort of remember those conventions by moments. I mean, like 12, you remember, I guess, Romney talking to the chair, and then
Clint talked to the chair.
Talked to the chair. Or the Clinties were talking to the chair. I mean, 2008 was like all Obama, but also Palin. I mean, that was quite a moment and quite a frenzy, which took place in St. Paul. 2004, I mean, it was in Democrats, it was the John Kerry convention, but really retroactively, we sort of remember it as the Obama, right? And then
Zell Miller, obviously.
Zell Miller on the Republican side, right? That's the speech you remember from that. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger came out, and I mean, there was a lot of very different times.
Rudy.
2016, Ted Cruz's speech, and then there was some pretty serious Democratic disarray then, because the Bernie thing and the Hillary thing. I mean, that was pretty hot at that point. And then there were no conventions in 2020. So, what was interesting about these two conventions is that, like, it's been a while, right? There's a lot of pent up energy for convention madness and convention dynamics, and it's unclear, what we'll remember about these two conventions, but. I have a pretty good idea. Like, I think the ear gauze imagery of the Republican convention, of the Trump convention, kind of lingers. You just kind of think of it. Well, both Trump himself, but also the kind of cosplaying ear gauze.
Creepy.
That a lot of the delegates were putting on, which was kind of weird. And then for this one, I don't know. Just I like the speeches, the star power, the energy.
It's Michelle. He's going after one of them black jobs. It's really that.
That was quite a moment. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'd be curious to know what you thought. Okay. I thought the Kamala speech, at least in the hall, I mean, everyone was like, oh, it's a home run. It's a home run. I felt like it was a double maybe in the hall. I think that when you were in the hall, she kind of paled a little bit next to the Obama, the Walz experience, and a couple of others maybe. But look, I think that when you saw it analyzed through clips, through the sort of the totality of what she did, especially she had some real great moments. I mean, he's an unserious man, but his danger is very serious. That was, I thought really, really good, and it's pretty good that the analysis landed on that. So I think
Here's why it was a double in the room and a home run, is because the people that it was a home run for were us, were me. It was my people that she was trying to hit a home run for. Like, she was trying to demonstrate to the people that put Biden over the top, that didn't vote for Hillary, that they could trust her, right? That she was up for the job, was presidential, shared their values. And so it was like all those lines, about America being the greatest country in the world. Yeah, the Democrats are cool with that. Like, that's good, but that's not getting a standing ovation the same way that Michelle making the black jobs joke is. But she was trying to get Bill Kristol to make the standing ovation. Selman McLean be like, okay, all right, now we're in business, right? Like, that's who her audience was broader than the room. And
I agree. And she hit it. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's smart too. I mean, I think, maybe there could be some blowback from the left, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think Biden that I think was the most successful thing that Biden did in 2020. I mean, he ran a kind of center-left campaign rather than a far-left campaign.
The only blowback I've seen from the left, well, I guess that they didn't let a Palestinian advocate speak, which is I do think was kind of an unforced error. Like they could have put him anywhere, and that's one of the things. Like, why not just check the box and move on? Put him at 6:15. You know, the only thing about her speech was the word lethal. And that's kind of one of those good gaffes. Like if you get like, I hope if you're a progressive with a big social media following listening, maybe pretend to be mad about that, because like that's the kind of thing that butches her up for the middle a little bit. People are like, oh man, those peaceniks are so upset that she used the word lethal. Like, but that was like really the only thing that I saw that people had any issue.
Yeah, I do. And it doesn't seem like an actionable gaffe if it wasn't even a gaffe, right? I mean, it's not like I'm not going to vote for her because of this word.
All right, so you follow Pete around. Did you get any sense that he that there's wishing could have been him?
Yeah, let me sort of bring you into like the journalism sausage factory here. The wishing here was that I needed to write a story, and I tried to get. I mean, Pete was in obviously great demand. I was, Liz Smith and his team were nice enough to let me in for a very brief period of time. I mean, I got a 14-minute interview, 21 minutes sort of walking from point A to point B. So it's just sort of the desperation there was just watching the Pete Buttigieg phenomena up close for as much time as I could get, and then just writing it up as quickly as possible. So that's what I did. I mean, look, Pete Buttigieg is a star. I mean, there are a lot of stars walking around the Democratic convention. I mean, there were a lot of kind of bubble entourage sensations. You'd see these scrums walking around the concourse or on the floor.
Who else? Like who are
AOC, certainly. I mean, anyone Obama adjacent. I mean, certainly Tim Miller, right? I mean, it's funny. I mean, a lot of the podcasters who have sort of emerged around the Trump era are huge, as you can attest. But I think who else? Wes Moore, anyone who's Tim Walz adjacent, any high-level staff, like in the sort of Pluff Cutter category at this point, Jen O'Malley. There was a lot of that.
There's a Jen O'Malley hive there?
I didn't actually see it, but I can imagine if Jen walked around for a few minutes, and if people recognize her, and you're in a crowd that people will recognize the Jen O'Malley Dillons of the world, you would have seen some fuss. Let's see. A lot of the governors, I mean, Gavin Newsom, I saw, had a fuss around him. Chris Coons had a fuss around him. He said people earnestly probably asking him about Biden, things like that. So, it was very specialized. I mean, this is a heavy user market of political junkies, obviously.
So you're following Pete around. One of the interesting things about your story that's just like one of these I'm getting old, time flies sort of things, like life is so strange, was you noted that, so this was like his first, not really his first convention as a star even, but like his first convention, right? And it kind of feels like he's been in our life for so long at this point. But in 2016, he was live blogging for Slate, which I did not realize. That was a fact about him I did not know. And the funniest thing to me is like to think about it. In 2016, both Pete, the top surrogate for Kamala, and a cabinet secretary, and J.D. Vance, a sitting senator who is the VP nominee, were both bloggers during Trump's first campaign. Like it was like we've gone in 8 years from bloggers to like the biggest stars at the respective conventions. So
I mean,
you out there, bloggers.
It's true. Actually, I mean, I think Pete blogged the Indiana primary for Slate, and I think he might have eventually gotten to the convention as a delegate. I know he rated an invite to the Obama 2012 convention, but he did not rate an invite to the 2008. And he also worked on the Kerry campaign in 2004. Certainly didn't rate an invite to that. So I mean, the guy's like, what's funny about Pete is he's such a fanboy, and he kind of lived the fanboy experience. And I remember interviewing him in 2020, and we talked about it the other day. He was at Harvard, I guess, in 2000. And there was a debate between Bush and Gore at the Kennedy Library in Boston, and he volunteered to like be a driver for some other volunteers on the Gore campaign, like people they wanted to plant in the crowd. And he was talking about how starstruck he was getting to meet like Donna Brazile and getting to meet like, Bob Shrum and people like that. Cause I mean, the guy, like a lot of young kind of Kennedy School or IOP types, he was just thrilled to be in the presence of this. And he was like a total fanboy. So he's on the other side of that.
That is so cute. So And the one thing that struck me about how much more public he's been since Kamala,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not reporting anything. I don't know anything, but I'm a keen observer like you are of the swamp condition.
Right.
I was with Pete maybe 6 months ago,
Mm-hmm.
and like we were off the record. And I was just like, why aren't you like I want more of you? Like you're doing a lot, but I want 10x of what you're doing. And like I didn't get a good answer.
Yeah.
And like I think that there was like a worry about overshadowing Biden during this period.
Yeah.
And I like that doesn't, like, you could imagine that would exist for Kamala. And like it doesn't. Like it feels like they want everybody out there. But I don't know. You tell me.
I think they do. I mean, I do think that, there were great sensitivities around Biden because let's face it, I mean, it wasn't that hard to overshadow him. Whether you were a really gifted political athlete like Pete Buttigieg or Gavin Newsom or whoever, or someone less talented, right? So it does seem like there's not a lot of insecurity about talent outshining Kamala, not because she can't be outshined, but because I think people are genuinely unified behind her
and excited,
and excited. And I had no sense whatsoever from anyone I talked to that Pete secretly wants her to lose, or Wall secretly wants her to lose, or Wes Moore secretly wants her to lose.
Okay, but what about Gavin though? What about Gavin?
It's funny. Gavin is Gavin's one guy I was really looking forward to running into and maybe catching up with a little bit. I mean, obviously he's in big demand. Only saw him from a distance. I mean, I spent time with him back in April, March or something like that for a pretty big story I did. He was in a different place. The race was in a different place. Would have loved to have kind of gotten a little window into his thinking, especially given his history with Kamala, given his history with Biden, given, his fairly, I wouldn't say obvious, but certainly frontal desire to run and certainly consideration about running and so forth. So it wasn't. I'd be curious to know what his thinking is.
He's welcome on the pod. I don't know. I was watching him on the pod with the Pod Bros, and I don't know. It feels like they're. I'm just joking. Obviously, Gavin Newsom wants Kamala Harris to win and is going to be out there working for and all that. But there is a sense of regrets. I have a few, maybe. I think.
It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, look, the guy. Obviously, I assume if Biden had gotten out from the outset, he probably would have run
for sure.
He also, I mean, his history with Kamala, so they go back San Francisco in the early aughts at least. I mean, I think when he was with Kimberly, and I don't know if she was with Doug. I don't think she was with Doug yet. But anyway, they would socialize. I mean, San Francisco Bay Area it's a small town, especially politically.
All right, we do have some Trump stuff to get to, but I have to do the Biden thing with you for a minute because you were out ahead of the pack, as is kind of your habit, talking about what people are whispering about. I forget, when was this? Early? Was it like January 20? I was at Disneyland, I think. When you
well, the first story I wrote on him is him being too old and shouldn't run was 2022. I mean, that was
right. Yeah, I was still living in Oakland.
Yeah, they didn't like me at all, and I wrote I wrote similar stories about how someone needed to primary him and so forth. A number of times.
But part of the story that I want to focus on, part of those stories was what came to be in a lot of the later stories, which was that the public talking points did not match what people were saying at the various cocktail parties that you reluctantly attend. And
I'm above it all, Tim.
Because you're very above it all.
I'm above
you are very above it all. That is not your scene, but you just have to go there.
No, just to assess. I have great remove. It's quite a game I play. Yeah,
I got to ask it. Was that happening at the DNC at all? Still about the current situation? I mean, he's keeping a pretty light schedule.
He's keeping. Yeah.
He was in California for a week. He's in Rehoboth all week. We're not seeing a lot of him. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. I'm not trying to do conspiracy mongering, but is there any buzz that people are concerned about August 27th through January 20th?
Possibly, maybe. I would say this. I mean, I think it's possibly a little more sad, which is that I think he's quite upset. I think he is still really wounded by this whole, the whole state of affairs this summer. I think he remains old. I think this summer has probably aged him and exhausted him even further. But I also think, and this is part of it, I mean, it's not like he's an asset out there. I mean, maybe he will be seen as an asset at some point strategically in Pennsylvania, parts of Michigan, things like that. But he, at this moment, seems like a man without a purpose within, what currently has been reconstituted as a very energized party. And that's kind of an ongoing awkwardness. I mean, this is one thing I'd say, Tim, and you probably heard something similar on Thursday night when everyone was still, it was the last night of the convention. People were pretty high about the whole week and Kamala's speech and all the speeches. I had about 3 or 4 different conversations with people saying the exact same thing. And they would say, can you imagine how we would feel if we had spent all the energy and all the time this week trying to push Biden over the finish line through Thursday night? And, we'd have to worry about, can he stay up this late I mean, these are very real considerations that I think
I would have had to. I think I might have had the same conversation where I was like, I think Sarah Longwell would have had to put me on administrative leave at the end of the week after gutting it out, because it just
absolutely no. I mean, it's and look,
but he could go. He could do stuff though. He could go on foreign trips. Yeah. Like he could. I don't know. You could do a pardon review. Like the president can still do other things. Like there's still presidenting things that he could be doing.
He has a real job, unlike Kamala.
Right.
I mean, hate to say it. I mean, it's like, okay, the vice president can work from home for the next 3 or 4 months, or like Pennsylvania or something like that. So home being Pennsylvania.
But yeah, it doesn't seem like he's doing that. My last. Just because it's you, I wouldn't do that if it wasn't for with this town audience. Mm-hmm. This is a little more indulgent than we like to get on the pod, but I do have one other piece of gossip.
Sure.
A prominent media person received a text following Pete's speech, speaking to your 21 minutes in the Pete bubble, from a high-ranking Biden official, upset that Pete didn't mention him.
Ooh, okay. I mean,
that's tough.
It doesn't surprise me, and it's also a window into that dynamic, which was not that far from the surface. I mean, there was talk. So Kamala and I guess Walz, right? Did Walz went up to Wisconsin on Tuesday night? They had that great rally at the Fiserv. Yeah. Were they together? Yeah. So they had that rally Tuesday night at the Fiserv Center, which looked like a brilliant move. You go into Trump's convention space, you blow it out, and then you simultaneously have the Obamas blowing out at the convention. But supposedly, I forgot where I read this, there was some concern about Biden being upset seeing the Harris-Walz.
I think that was bullshit. You think that was real?
Hey, I read it somewhere. It might have been on Twitter. No,
I
don't know.
One that should know. That's why you're on the podcast, Mark Leibovich. You're supposed to know who's mad at who.
Okay,
that's why you're here.
Get this. It's true. It's 100% true. No, but Biden's up in his feelings. There's no question about it. I mean, you don't have to be Sigmund Freud, or whatever. Sigmund Freud's such a dated reference. I disavow Sigmund Freud. Yeah.
Dr. Drew?
No, someone. No, look, I mean, there's Pelosi stuff. There's Obama stuff. There might be Kamala stuff. There are people in the White House or close to the White House noticing slights or perceived slights about Pete Buttigieg not mentioning Joe Biden enough or at all in his speech. I mean, to me, that takes up a lot of energy, and he remains a sensitive sort of part of all this that's obviously not going away, at least till January.
Right. Well, I guess I would rather it be a little bit sad than it be concerning. So I think if those are the options.
Sure.
I want to talk about this debate over Kamala interviews and then get into your colleague Elena Platt's latest on the people doing servitude for Trump. But the playbook this morning, it just has this whole fucking thing about, which network is going to get the first Kamala interview and who's going to do it and when are they going to do it and are they going to meet their goal by the end of the month? It's like, who fucking cares about this? Like what is why don't they just rip off the Band-Aid and get this over with? Like, what is happening?
Yeah. And by the way, you don't even have to, I mean, you can do it with like a friendlier interview.
Nicole's available. I'm right here.
Exactly.
Anybody's available.
I would talk, I would happily talk to her. Not that I'm friendly or safe or reliable or anything like you guys.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I'm kidding. No, I mean, I don't know, just like it doesn't, take the energy out of this. But I also think, look, I'm all for interviews. I think transparency is good. I think interviews are good. I think the press should be, I think public officials should talk to the press. But I also just don't think in the real world there are a lot of Sarah Longwell focus group members who are saying, I will not vote for this woman until she sits down with David Muir. And if she does David Muir and not Gayle King, I will be upset. I mean, like, come on.
The whole thing is crazy. I felt like it makes me feel so like the most of remove from DC reading this playbook thing. It was like, and so is calling Tony West and Maya about how they should get the first interview, and so is calling Brian Fowler. And she's like, who cares who gets the first interview? Just do an interview, do a couple, do some friendly ones, do interviews. Don't do interviews with these people, by the way. Do interviews with media, with black media, with Charlemagne, with D.L. Hughley. Do media with like weird TikTok people I've never heard of, right? Like, do whatever. Do whatever. The whole thing is crazy. So I want to talk about the Trump people. Like, what just like the mood, the Mar-a-Lago mood music these days, like, feels pretty rough, huh? Like, but it's almost like it's out of balance with the actual race. Like, the race is not is still close.
It's extremely close.
Yeah.
It's extremely.
How do you assess that?
I mean, look. I mean, I think. I guess the Trump campaign, one thing we're learning is that there's never much of a campaign. Like, I mean, yes, you can say that they really know what they're doing this time, but then you see like some adversity and you realize that basically it's all a reflection of the candidate. And, are we waiting for the Corey Lewandowski era to emerge more fully? And I mean, I don't know. That's all 2016, right? I mean, but yeah, I mean, it's the race remains really, really close, and you would think that the fundamentals, like traditionally, are very much on the side of the responsibly, strategically run Democratic race, the more disciplined nominee, and so forth. But here we are. So the mood music seems really bad. I mean, I'm just struck by how unprepared they were by all of this. I mean, the idea that there was this 80% chance pretty much at their convention that I think Kamala Harris or at least Biden was going to step down. And yet they seem completely flat-footed by that, is to me malpractice. But at the same time, I mean, Donald Trump is like walking political malpractice. And he has, of course, shown people again and again that can win, or at least that can retain a complete stranglehold on one of our two political parties. So I don't know. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but it's certainly a different or a new version of a movie we've seen many, many times before.
Yeah, he's on his fourth nickname far, and it's Comrade, which doesn't really land for me. Even Commie Kamala would have been better, I think, than Comrade. It's a little, it's not great, I don't think either, but it's just who's that? Who's that for?
I don't know. I mean, you'd think it'd be like some old, like kind of John Bircher kind of like Reagan.
Does he not already have those people?
Not really. I mean, you would think not, right? They're either dead or probably, I don't know. I mean,
if they were still alive, though, I was probably not voted. Anybody who's like gets a good chuckle out of Comrade Kamala, I don't think was a gettable voter.
You're probably right, Tim. I think that's totally, that's 100% right.
Did you see the Sam Stein wrote about this morning for the Bulwark that they're running ads now in Palm Beach?
Oh my God. That was a great piece. I mean, it's we've heard this before, but it's really stunning. But of course, not stunning if you've been following this guy and the pathology around this guy for 8 years now. It just keeps getting to be a kind of thicker reduction. What's that cooking thing? Is it a reduction? Yeah, it's a reduction. Right. It's like, a thick thing where the essence of it is distilled to
like a cherry reduction. Yeah.
Mark on cooking. Not something you're going to hear very much. But yeah, no, I mean, like everything. So this is actually a lead into the Kash Patel story by my colleague Elena Plott, but also, the idea that they would actually put any money, time, resources into running ads just so their client in Palm Beach can watch it is insane, pathetic, and completely on brand.
Yeah. The man who will do anything for Trump is the headline. Why Kash Patel is exactly the kind of person who would serve in the second Trump administration. There's one part of the story about a military action in Africa I want to really dig in on. But I'm just at the biggest picture, since this is sort of representative of your having hung out at the Trump Hotel,
right,
and like knowing these people, like what, like give people a little bit of color about Kash and like the types and how maybe the mix of people might be different in 2025 if you were to return versus what it looked like in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, the reason, so we're talking about this because, Elena Plott, my colleague, a friend of, friend of good journalism, wrote
also,
this great...
she's a friend of the show.
Friend of the show. I mean, I'm sure. I don't want to presume anything.
She was on. We had a great episode.
You told me at the beginning of this podcast that you were not sure I rose to the level of... I mean, so I'm... I know...
No, just not to the Tom Nichols level. We're ranking the Atlantic people. It's Nichols and Frum are on one category.
Okay.
You and Elena are kind of in category 2. That you haven't quite got like the gold watch yet. That's all I'm saying. The green jacket.
Again, something to work for.
I was on the Elena episode, by the way, that I first revealed that I was coconut curious. So I think that could end up being a historic document because we were discussing her piece on Kamala. And I was like, I think that Kamala's been treated unfairly, and I think I'm coconut curious. It was early July, and that really, I think, has aged well for the 6 weeks that it's been.
Young history students, 40, 50 years from now, maybe 100 years from now, we'll look back on the Coconut Curious podcast.
Yeah.
So Elena wrote this great piece on Kash Patel. It's a profile of Kash Patel, who was this complete Trumpy flunky, but also way over the top. I mean, someone who, as the headline indicates, will do anything to please Donald Trump, which, of course, if you are in the Trump orbit, if you please Donald Trump, you will juice your own standing, your own ambitions inside that world. And so in a rational world, that where such an administration did not exist or come to power, this would be a pure laughingstock because of the world we live in or could live in if the election goes a certain way in November. Kash Patel could have a very big job, and I think one of the things about Elena's story that was just essential to realize is that this is maybe an over the top version of someone who could do this, but very much not a one-off. I mean, this is an administration that would be populated top to bottom, in Donald Trump's ideal vision, with people like this. The only potential check on this is what the Senate would abide, and I think there's a really good chance it could be a Republican Senate. The question is, could they get into cabinet or Senate confirmed positions? But just very scary display, but also really well told story about the kind of person who could really thrive in the next, if there is a next Donald Trump administration.
Yeah, and with Mitt gone, you really are looking at Susan and Lisa. You know what I mean? Like if you get to 53, it's like who's going to stop? We're going to be waiting for John Cornyn to show a spine. You start like the type of person that would have to stop a confirmation depending on how the Senate shakes out. Anyway, here's the one story that I think is worth really highlighting. It happened October 30th, 2020. SEAL Team 6 was awaiting the green light on a rescue mission in West Africa. The administration had recently learned where gunmen were holding an American who had been kidnapped. Multiple agencies were coordinating on the final details for the evening operation, but it was the State Department's job to resolve securing airspace permission from Nigerian officials. Wanted to make sure the people in Nigeria knew that SEAL Team 6 was coming in so they didn't shoot him down. Around noon, Kash Patel called the Pentagon with an update. Pompeo had gotten the approval. The mission was a go. The SEALs were close to landing in Nigeria when DOD discovered that state had not, in fact, secured the clearance. Patel had just made it up. Story goes on from there. People should read the whole thing in the Atlantic and subscribe. But okay, I mean, think about the fact that this guy is in this position at all, and to be like the liaison between the Secretary of State and the Defense Department is insane. And then when you kind of expand that out to be like, in the next Trump administration, it's going to be mostly Kash's. Like the one-offs will be the people that are like, hey, actually, maybe we should do this the correct way. I mean, that is sociopathic stuff. Like that isn't like it's one thing to be like, oh, this is just a dumbass, and he's encouraging Trump to send out a mean tweet. Like that's bad. But this is like we're lying to the defense secretary about what the Secretary of State said and putting our people at risk. And it's madness.
Yeah, it's such a chilling account in this story. I mean, I think first of all, I mean, thank God they got these people out. I mean, this thing, it was a successful mission. Ultimately, it did not cost any lives, but it easily could have. And the piece sort of talks about, just the kind of the ire that was raised, I think, rightly among the people who sort of learned what had happened after the story, thank God, ended well. But yeah, this was a window just into the pure nihilism of one desperate man, which I think, as I was reading it, it kind of mimicked Trump on January 6th, just sort of watching TV and passively doing nothing, feeling gratitude, it seems, for the insurrectionists. And this is the same thing. I mean, no sense whatsoever of life and death and personal safety and law enforcement or diplomacy or any of the things that you would hope that a high-level official, much less the president, would keep front and center in their mind. Just the desperation of wanting to do something to please this similarly erratic person at the top of the chart is really chilling, because that could be the next norm, right? I mean, It's an extraordinary story to read in retrospect during an incredibly tenuous time. But again, going forward, this could be maybe, some preview of the next level of pathology we see in an administration like this.
And here's the other thing that's just worth sitting on for a second. Mm-hmm. Of the players in that conversation, you had Pompeo, who's the Secretary of State. Not a fan of Mike Pompeo on this podcast. Okay, mm-hmm. You had Esper, who's the Secretary of Defense at the time. I'm so to plus on Esper. We'll see. He was on CNN yesterday implying he might vote for Kamala. So Esper,
he's coconut curious.
Yeah, he's coconut curious. Mark Esper, coconut curious. We just got to get him over the line. Yeah. Pompeo, we don't like. Kash. These are the three key players, right, in negotiating this. Kash is the one that almost gets our people killed by randomly lying about whether the Nigerians have secured airspace. Mm-hmm. That's October 30th, 2020. A month later, when Donald Trump is trying to execute a coup, Pompeo is out, kind of half supporting it, just like tacitly, but not really involved. Mm-hmm. Esper's literally out, kicked out. Mm-hmm. Patel is trying to take over the government and be like the lead man for the whatever, the Vichy, the coup, like whatever you want to call the rogue Trump administration during the transition. And now, fast forward 4 years later, Pompeo wouldn't be in the next administration. Esper wouldn't be in the next administration. Patel would, right? Like that is like the craziest part about this. Like you hear the story where it's like one person is obviously the most incompetent. For put ideology aside, one person is like should be nowhere near levels of levers of power, and Trump looks at that situation as like, oh yeah, I want the lying crazy person. That's the guy that we're keeping around. You other two that we're just worried about like responsibly doing this exfil. I'm not really that interested in you anymore.
Yeah. By the way, how sure are you that Pompeo wouldn't serve in the next Trump administration? I mean, I don't know. Has he really done anything to? I mean, he's sort of been laying low.
That's fair. I guess he's out of the circle of trust, though. I guess. Probably. I mean, you can get back into the circle of trust with Donald Trump just by putting on a red hat. Like if right now I took off my Nuggets hat and replaced it with a MAGA hat and was like, Mark Leibovich, here's the big reveal. I'm going full Donald Trump. I've been wrong. I love Donald Trump. I would be on the short list for press secretary if I did that, right? Like he doesn't care about the past, obviously. Like as long as you pay homage to him, you're in. So sure, Pompeo could be back, but like right now, the only person in the circle of trust is the one that totally fucked up that situation in the most astonishing way imaginable, and the two people acting responsible are out of the circle of trust.
Yeah, I'm sure Trump would appoint a blue ribbon commission to really get to the bottom of how that went south in at the end of 2020. No, I mean, true. I mean, it's up and down. I mean, that's what a Trump victory would look like. Just full stop. And again, you can't put any trust in a Republican Senate or Republican anything. Presuming that they're not. I would say, Mitt Romney, Adam Kinzinger level at this point, and, maybe
Right.
Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski in the Senate. So,
woof, dark times. Anything else, Mark? Any other gossip for us? Any other news, insights,
gossip,
deep thoughts,
innuendo,
insults? I take insults. I was rooting for Serbia. In the
Were
Olympics.
you because of Jokic?
Unapologetic. I was rooting for Serbia. I love America. I love this country. I believe in American exceptionalism. I was rah-rahing all of Kamala's most jingoistic lines at the convention. That said, Kevin Durant's Twitter feed got under my skin.
Okay.
And I love Nikola Jokic. And for one time only, I was rooting for Serbia. So maybe that's a room for an insult. I was just throwing that.
I think it's room for an insult, but I come at it for different selfish reasons, which I thought that Jason Tatum was seriously disrespected by Steve Kerr. In fact, at the convention, when Steve Kerr was speaking, I tried unsuccessfully in the press area to get a Jason Tatum, kind of mocking Jason Tatum chant going, and I failed miserably, but I feel
okay. Have you had a chance to confront Steve Kerr in the hallway? Did you have a chance?
I have not, but I was hoping for it because I would have gotten right in his face on the Jason Tatum thing. I mean, I think, politically, he gave a good speech. I thought it was effective. It was perfect, coming back to the United Center, Bulls, blah, blah, blah. And Steph Curry, I mean, there was a lot going on there. But no, I can't get beyond Jason Tatum. I mean, at root, I love America as much as anyone does, Tim, including you. But, ultimately, I'm a parochial masshole, and we are the worst. So I hide it well. I mean, I love America. Look, but let's agree that the things that bring us together, Tim, are stronger than the things that divide us.
I will agree with that. And Mark Leibovich, we'll be talking to you soon. Up next, our mutual friend, Juliana Glover.
Thank you, Tim.